Have you ever wondered which areas around an airport will be most affected if an aircraft accident occurred during takeoff or landing? In today's video, I'll show you how to build an Aircraft Accident Susceptibility Map using ArcGIS Pro. Starting from runway geometry, land use data and population density, we'll create a weighted spatial model that identifies the areas potentially most exposed to risk. The final result is the map you are seeing on the screen right now. Stay with me and I'll show you step by step how we can go from raw geographic data to a complete susceptibility assessment using a straightforward GIS workflow. Let's start by adding a base map to the project. Here we can see the aircraft runway, which is approximately 1,700 meters long. The objective is to carry out a risk analysis of this type of accident. In our content span, we have the baseline information. We have land use and land cover data with categories such as agriculture, artificialized areas, forests, open spaces, water bodies, and woodlands, as well as population data. Let's begin by working on the runway. Assuming that aircraft accidents are more likely to occur during takeoff and landing operations, we will analyze two types of lines: lines parallel to the runway and lines aligned with the runway direction itself. We will start by drawing lines with the predefined distances, which will serve as the basis for the assumed landing or takeoff direction of the aircraft. With the desired line selected, click on this vertex. Then, while hovering the cursor over the existing line, click parallel to indicate to the software that you want to draw the new line in the same direction as the existing one. And next, right-click anywhere on the screen and enter 500 meters. Finally, double-click or press F2 to complete the line. Next, we will repeat the process 3 more times for this direction, always using 500 meters as the base distance. To complete this side, we only need to create one more parallel line, but this time extending it to the edge of our study area, as I'm showing here. We then repeat the same process for the opposite end of the runway. Next, we open the attribute table of the shapefile and create a new field. I will name it value with the data type set to short, for example. We will assign higher values to the features that are closer to the runway. The runway itself, along with the segments immediately before and after, it will be assigned a value of 5, as shown here. For the features located further away, we will gradually decrease the value according to their distance from the runway. This one will be assigned a value of 4, this one a value of 3, this one a value of 2, and finally the outermost feature will be assigned a value of 1. And then we repeat for the other side. I will adjust the colors to an appropriate visual scheme so that the distance from the runway are clearly represented using a gradient that ranges from green to red. We will now reopen the attribute table and create a new field called distance. This field will represent a lateral distance from the runway following a cone-shaped pattern that reflects the risk distribution model illustrated in the diagram explained earlier. The selected distances will increase according to the aircraft's expected altitude. For this reason, the areas closest to the runway will be assigned the lowest distance values, while progressively larger distances values will be assigned as we move further away from the runway, reflecting the widening impact area associated with increasing altitude. In this way, I will assign a distance of 200 meters to the runway area. The zone with a value of 4 will be assigned 300 meters. The zone with a value of 3 will be assigned 500 meters. The zone with a value of 2 will be assigned 1000 meters. And the outmost zone will be assigned 2000 meters. We will now go to the Analysis tab and search for the Buffer tool. Set runway as the input features, then change this option to Field. Set the run type to flat, and under dissolve choose either value or distance, as both will work in this case. The field selected above must be the distance field that we created earlier. I have only changed the name of the buffer here, And I will also adjust the color scheme to match the color levels that were used earlier. Next, I will move on to the land use and land cover layer, where I will also create a field called value. In this field, I will assign the following values as shown in the screen. I will also adjust the colors in the symbology settings, but first I will change the visualization field to value. As we can see, the artificialized areas have been assigned the highest weight with a value of 5, largely because they are the areas where the presence of population is most likely. The assumption forms the basis for the application of this methodology. We will now move on to the population shapefile, where we will create a new field called population density. Remember that to calculate population density we need both the population value and the area. In this case, the area is expressed in square kilometers. For the calculation, we use population divided by the area and click OK. For densities from 0 to 50, we assign a value of 1. For densities from 50 to 200, we assign a value of 2. Densities up to 500 are assigned a value of 3. From 500 to 1500 are assigned a value of 4, and all remaining densities, meaning those above 1500, are assigned a value of 5. I will also proceed with modifying the colors for this layer. We now have the 3 shapefiles required to carry out the risk analysis. The next step is to convert them into a raster format by exporting each layer to a raster dataset. To do this, go to the Analysis tab, click More Tools, and search for the Polygon to Raster tool. For each layer, always select the value field as the value field, as this is the field containing the weights that we want to use in the analysis. I will save the results in a specific folder called Results. This output will be named lolc. The cell size defines the pixel size, and in this case I will use 10 meters. Under Environments, I will assign the coordinate system, the same as the project. The cell size has already been defined. Snap raster will be left blank, and all the remaining settings can be left at their default values. And then we can click Run. We now have the lolc raster created with a pixel size of 10 meters. We will now repeat exactly the same process for the population layer and for the runway buffer layer. Now I will set the population shapefile as the input and the name output pop. The only setting we need to change under environments is the snap raster option, which should be set to the raster we created previously. This ensures that all pixels are perfectly aligned with the previous raster. In other words, the first raster will serve as the reference grid for all subsequent rasters, including the final output. We then repeat the same process for the runway buffer shapefile using the same settings and ensuring that the snap raster is set to the reference raster so that all pixels remain perfectly aligned across every layer. Before moving on to the final calculation, there is one important step that still needs to be completed. If we look at the runway raster, we can see that it contains values ranging from 1 to 5, but there are also areas within the study area that appear blank. These cells are classified as no data, meaning they do not contain any value. This becomes a problem when we combine this raster with other rasters during the final analysis. In raster calculations, whenever a cell contains no data, the resulting output for that cell will also be no data, even if the corresponding cells in the other rasters contain valid values. As a result, large portions of the study area could be excluded from the analysis simply because they have no value in this particular raster. Since we want the entire study area to be included in the final risk assessment, we first need to perform a reclassification. This process allows us to assign a value to the cells currently marked as no data, ensuring that every cell within the study area has a valid value and can participate in the final calculation. To address this, we will search for the Reclassify tool and set the runway raster as the input layer. For the no data cells, I will assign the lowest value in our scale, which is 1. We then choose the output location and file name. I will add an R to the name to indicate that this raster has been reclassified. One important detail is that if we simply assign a value to no data, the software has no way of knowing how far that reclassification should extend because there is no defined boundary. To solve this, we need to define a mask, which effectively represents the limits of our analysis area. For the mask, I will use the lolk raster as it already covers our entire study area. This ensures that the reclassification is applied only within the study area boundaries, filling the cells that previously contained no data with a value of 1 while preventing the operation from extending beyond the area of interest. To complete the analysis, we will now combine the rasters by multiplying them according to the weight shown on the screen. This will allow us to generate the Aircraft Accident Susceptibility Map, where areas with higher values represent locations that are potentially more susceptible to the impacts associated with aircraft accidents. We will now search for the raster calculator tool and enter the following expression. 0.6 multiplied by the runway raster plus 0.2 multiplied by the lolk raster plus 0.2 multiplied by the population density raster. Next, choose the output location and specify the file name. I will name the output final_result. Under environments, use the same settings that we configured earlier. Once everything is set up, click Run. Notice that I assigned a higher weight to the takeoff and landing corridor, for the obvious reason that accidents are more likely to occur in these areas. Naturally, densely populated areas that intersect this flight path will end up having a greater influence on the final result, as we will be able to see. To finalize the analysis, we need to represent the results using a classified scale. Since we have been working with values ranging from 1 to 5 from the very beginning, I will also divide the final results into 5 classes. To determine the class intervals, we subtract the minimum value from the maximum value and divide the result by the number of classes. In other words, 5 minus 1 divided by 5 classes, which gives a value of 0.8. This means that each class will cover an interval of 0.8, creating 5 equally spaced classes across the entire range values. As we can see, the maximum value obtained is 4.2. This means that the highest class, which would correspond to a value of 5, does not occur anywhere within the study area. This allows us to conclude that, according to the assumptions and weighting scheme adopted in this analysis, there are no locations within the study area that reach the highest level of aircraft accident susceptibility. Instead, the areas identified as most susceptible fall within the second highest class. That's all for today's video. I hope you have learned something useful and that you will be able to apply these techniques and concepts in your work, your studies, or even in your own personal projects. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment what you want to learn next.